Thank you for joining us, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon on a Saturday. Today, we are going to be learning from Wayne Freedman about the best practices to enter this year's Emmy Awards. That is our 51st annual Northern California, San Francisco area Emmy Awards. And a lot has changed in the call for entries this year. So to alleviate any confusion, Wayne is here to spread his expertise, how to enter, what to enter, category changes, and kind of go over the rules. So with that, I will toss over to Wayne. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Randy. And hello, everybody. And welcome to my living room in North Carolina, for now anyway. Yes, there have been some changes this year, and we wanted to do this as we did last year, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Inevitably, there will be stuff we repeat 2 or 3 times as people come on and log off. But basically, I'm here as a resource for all of you who are thinking of entering this year, wondering how to do it, what you should together, what you shouldn't. Got a kid called me last night, and we probably talked for half an hour about what works and what doesn't work, and maybe he'll come back in later. But let me go over first, and we'll talk about these again later, and you may have questions about them. But there are changes in this year's rules. These were initiated by National. As you know, we're one chapter among many, but we abide by rules that are set by National. And when National says you got to go do it this way, we got to do it that way. So the top of the list, the headline, is this new definition for producer. In the past, as I think you all know, those of you who've entered the contest, we were fairly lax in terms of you could enter a story in a craft category, and then you wanted to get in on the editorial, the programming or the content side, and you would put your name on there. We wouldn't let you enter as a photographer or a reporter or whatever you had entered on the craft side. We said, well, you got to put your name down as a producer. That is not going to fly anymore with the National Academy. Now, if you're going to put your name down as a producer on an entry, you had better darn well be a producer. To the extent that they even have come up with a checklist now that we have to abide by, and that we will ask people. It's still an honor system, but that we will ask people when they submit. Bottom line, this is the criteria. I'm going to read directly from what they told us. 1, 8 points, and you have to have a majority of these in order to qualify as a producer. Serving as an overseer of the content, determining overall tone, structure, look, sound, and mission of the content. Okay. The second one is you need to make strategic editorial decisions that have significant impact on the resulting content. And that is of the entire production, not just a portion of the production. Identify interview subjects and shoot locations, schedule interviews and shoots and edits, writing and or approving scripts, formulating ideas for graphics, animations, working with designers through completion, working with editors and designers to ensure the content meets expectations. And for studio-based programs or content, the producer would generally fulfill much of the above and or oversee control room discussions. Further, they state, as they have in the past, that executive producers and management personnel, like news directors, are not eligible for Emmys unless they are directly involved in the hands-on production of the work submitted. Those who serve in a managerial or supervisory role should not be listed on an entry. To be considered, executive producers, general managers, news directors, other management personnel must have directly participated in the execution of the video. And in such case, they need to write a written request to the committee outlining what that person did in the production. So there are stricter rules. Does that make sense to everybody? You have any questions about that? Anybody want to weigh in?
On the news directors not being listed, that doesn't go for the newscasts, correct? That's only for the content enemy?
And again, it's something that we are going to have to discuss on a case-by-case basis. Now, if that news director was directly involved, hands-on, got in there, left the office, formatted the program, did some of the writing on the program, did the general work that's involved, yes. But generally, that's going to come under the purview of an executive producer. No, we are not wedded to 100% compliance, but we're going to ask some tough questions, and we expect direct answers. And the problem is that if somebody comes back and says, "Oh, this wasn't the case, they were cheating," then that's going to jeopardize everybody getting to the Emmy. So you really want to play it straight. Anybody else?
Yes, we have allowed news directors to be news director in category 1, 2, and 3, 4. So they can enter with a news director title in newscast and in overall excellence, news excellence.
Okay.
Anywhere else where they have hands-on, they have to be listed as executive producer, as hands-on person. They cannot be listed as news director other than those first 4 categories.
I think the bottom line here is we're going to be tougher. We don't want to be tougher. It's probably going to cost us money because we won't have as many entries this year. But there's a lot of concern by the National Academy that they want to make sure that Emmys really do mean something, and that when an Emmy is given and awarded, that it's truly earned. There are so many people, and I think a lot of people in this room can talk about cases where they had somebody piggyback an Emmy, someone who did very little work. That's just not going to fly anymore. You know, there will be people that get around it, but we do rely on the honor system for that. Okay, and that's a tough one, but that's the way it has to be. Anybody else have a comment or question on this? Okay.
Hey, Wayne, I did have a quick question, and it's a little bit off topic, but it's interrelated. So it's my understanding that if you cross the threshold and get approval to get more than 12 people listed on any given award, that everyone then all of the entrants are assessed an additional $25 fee. Is that generally meant to discourage, these submissions that have 15, 20 or more people listed on them?
I don't think we want to discourage anybody, but it's a larger number of people to deal with. 12 is a lot already. You add more people, it's more work for Daryl. Daryl, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, it's really a national rule. The 12 maximum is basically where they want to be. So there is a surcharge of everyone involved over the 12. I think with this new producer rule, we're going to see that you have to be really involved with the editorial side of the industry, that, the 25 people that included everybody that happened to have anything to do with the production, putting their name on it, is going to be difficult to maintain when we start looking at the titles and what they actually did. But that rule is still there. So if there is 20 people that were involved with the editorial side of the entry, yes, they could enter, but yes, they all have to pay.
It's Devin, as you'll find out this year when we do certifying, it's more work, a lot more work, and a lot more time. And we already have 1,000 entries to look at. So it's tough, but if that means if they want to do more, they're going to have to pay for it because it's an extraordinary situation. Let's talk about the other big issue this year and the other big change, and that has to do with something they call category viability. This applies to both English and to Spanish categories, and it's especially pertinent in Spanish, where you don't have as big a contest, but there were many, many, many categories. Our bylaws require, for example, that roughly 25%, the guidelines are 25% of every category is nominated, that 10% receive Emmys. The way it's been working with Spanish, that's been impossible to meet that number. And that was thanks to Devin's mathematical computation one time. So out of that issue with Spanish has come an issue that affects pretty much everyone. And that means that the Academy wants competition. It's in the business of recognizing excellence, but it also needs context for that excellence. So they're saying that anything between 4 and 9 entries could leave a category with the words they use is not viable, which means it would not compete, which gives us some different options. We would have the option of eliminating that category, which is something we would not ever want to do, or perhaps merging that category with another. And it would be a like type category. We would certainly not put you in a category where you wouldn't have a chance. In fact, you might wind up in a category where you have a better chance, all things considered. In either case, if we get to a situation where we have to deem a category not viable, you're in it, we will notify you and give you all of your options. And those options will include saying you want to opt out of the contest, in which case we will give you your money back. But we're, again, and this sort of goes back into the producer category thing where we want to make sure that the people who win these Emmys truly earn them. We want the spirit of competition, and they're just putting a higher bar on it. Are there questions about that?
Hi, it's McKenna from Hawaii. I thought more of our team would be on and from our station. I do want to, if you can touch Wayne, because I know a lot of people want to watch this after when it gets posted. If you could clarify the position, because we had some interesting conversation in our building about producers who are considered there just during the production day of either running prompter or there in the studio. Are they just because they are there in when the program or content is filmed, are they eligible for producer entry?
No, someone running prompter is not a producer. Again, McKenna, you look to the guidelines, you look to the 8 points made by the Academy. This is the definition of what a producer does.
Right.
So,
I think.
Yeah, you can't just, we're not just going to, this is the kind of situation we really want to avoid. We don't want somebody who showed up at the scene, ran a camera, putting his name in for an Emmy and taking the thing home. You got to have done the work.
Okay. All right.
So,
yeah, that was a big topic there this week, as well as you've already touched on it, the executive producers and news directors. Just some other things I'm just trying to think that were asked. Cameraman as well. So in a piece, say content in a package that came from one person, but was a part of a news story in a show, are their names eligible if those shots are used? Say we have rallies or we have things that were creatively shot by content directors, say for in this case, up on the Mauna Kea that were a current issue happening here. Are they eligible to be entered into the Emmys?
I don't know why they wouldn't be if they were photographers, but they should enter as photographers. If they turn around then and want to double that entry in a craft category, also as a photographer, there's going to be a problem. They're going to have to make a Sophie's choice, one or the other.
I think, can I add, McKenna, you as the
Hi, Pamela.
producer, yeah, you have the option, you know who did what, and it's up to you to determine who made a significant contribution to the piece. Yeah. So if it's somebody who just did one day of shooting, you have to weigh that against the contributions of the other people that are submitting on your entry.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. That was a big conversation the other night. We sat through and looked through all the new entries. I mean, all the new categories as well. So I'll bring that back and I'll be happy to share this as soon as we're done with this too. Yeah. Thank you. That was
bottom line. Yeah. Bottom line, McKenna, again, the Emmy's got to mean something. Randy, did you have something to say there?
Oh, no, I was just going to interject. In other words, the best way to look at a producer is for the work performed versus what your title in the newsroom is. We have a lot of breaking news stories at our station where, you'll have producers doing a lot of other jobs, but not necessarily producing a newscast. And if you're going to enter something like that, and they're just, running prompter in the studio, that's not necessarily a producer, even though their role is a producer, their title is producer. In that newscast, their role is not.
Look, again, I point to those eight guidelines. Running prompter, no. Running a camera in the studio, probably not. The producer has to.
We're broadening the conversation from who is eligible to enter the Emmy Awards rather than just the word producer. And the editorial portion of the entry is the thing that's important, is that they add to the editorial content of that entry. And that is an assignment editor making the assignment and getting it going is definitely part of the entry. A production assistant is not. So in the past, we've taken production assistants that just made them an associate producer to get them on the entry form. That isn't going to happen this year. So I think that's the main difference, is that the number of entrants on an entry are going to go down this year because of the people that actually worked on the entry. That's why we offer a production certificate. The production certificate or the production wall plaque is available for everybody that assisted in the entry but was not part of the entry. So if the PA, ripped the scripts for the newscast, they can get a production plaque or production certificate as a PA, but they would not get a statue. But they would not have their name on for statue, but they could certainly get a production certificate entry is recipient.
So it's a higher bar. Bottom line, higher bar. You have to make the decisions that affect the production itself, not just be there pressing a button or doing whatever.
Thank you for.
Any questions, any more on this? If you do have
This is
questions.
Terry from Reno. I just have a clarification. I know you don't production assistant down as a producer, but if maybe the entry's 8 people and they're one of them, a production assistant or whatever, prompter operator, I think they might be essential in a breaking news situation or whatever. I don't know. Could they put their name on that entry as prompter operator or something along those lines, or do they have to have an official title recognized by the Academy in order to be on that entry?
Asking me that question?
The answer is yes, it has to be a recognized category that is eligible for the editorial content. And a prompter operator would not be, a PA would not be. It has to be, someone that really worked on it, photographer, editor.
It's a difference between pressing buttons and making decisions.
Content, right.
Affecting content and writing along. We're not going to have this year, for lack of a better description, I would call them coattail Emmys. They're done.
And that's how I think, just to be fair, it got heated a little of the work of the use of teamwork, who's there in the room, who's there for production. But I think that there's a big difference between creating the content and then being there just for the 6 or 7 hours that, that are filmed.
No, if you worked weeks or days, we're raising the value of the statue. This is going to be a multi-year process.
Okay.
And
all right.
I agree with it, but it's going to be tough for some people.
It really is.
It is, but we're going back to the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we won't make as much money this year in our budget, and that's something we have to deal with. But it's the right thing to do. And we will let as many people in and as many people enter. It's not like we don't want to have people enter. We do. We want to see people recognized. But there will be some tough decisions this year.
Just don't get the wrong idea that we're in this to make money, because that's not the purpose of the Emmy Awards or the contest. The contest is to cover the cost of, and those statues are expensive. The certificates are expensive to produce. The administration time to make this contest work is expensive. That's the part that we're covering. We're not out to try to make a bundle of money because of this contest. That's not what the Academy is for.
Would never imply that. But he's correct.
Wayne, and of course, a director of the newscast isn't there with the planning necessarily. Depends. Could be a breaking news situation. They are pressing buttons, but I do believe I've seen directors being put on award. Am I missing it? I mean, I know we're threading the needle here, but I mean, if just in case I get these questions, would a director of the newscast be put on there?
I would think yes. I think that a director is doing more than simply pressing buttons. A director is directly involved in what's going on. He's pressing the buttons that affect the shows and making the.
Yeah, I think Randy can speak to that one. He's definitely part of the newscast. I
was going to say that the director is directly involved. You might be just a part of the technical crew, but the director is making the decisions. The director is the one, in when things go wrong, making the call of how to handle things, how to move through a newscast.
Yeah,
that's how I always looked at it.
The director is crucial. So look, we've had some category changes as well. Let me go through those. And as I finish with those, then we can talk about those. Fair enough. We looked at a lot of stuff this year in terms of what we wanted to add and what we didn't want to add. My iPad, of course, has just ended. There are new categories now reflecting the times for diversity and equity and inclusion. They'll be both in Spanish and English. As of now, we offer both long and short form submissions in this category. Depending on how many we have, this would be something where if we had 2 in one and 8 or 9 in the other, where we would combine them. But I don't think we're going to have a problem. But this is an interesting category, and it's going to be wide open. It'll be very interesting to see how it comes together and what we have entered. Last year, we had a category called societal concerns. and then we tagged government along with it. This year we are splitting them, and we've refined the definition of societal concerns. It's now more of a catch-all category, as it says in the call for entries. This category is intended for serious subject matter not already covered by other existing categories, including business, consumerism, education, environment, science, politics, government. In other words, you might think of this as the flip side of human interest. You know, human interest is generally a feature. This is for areas that we don't otherwise cover. A couple of entries last year in this category. For example, we're in education, and we're in government, or we're in something else, and we move those categories over, saying, "Look, there is an education category. This goes here. There is an environment category. This goes there." So it's not just like a second option for you to go and think, "Oh, I can put my environmental story in here, so it won't compete against myself." It has to be something decidedly different, not otherwise covered by our rules and by our other categories. Does that make sense to everybody?
And can I ask a question about that? Here in the Bay Area specifically, we've had a huge amount of organized retail theft this past year. Can organized retail theft go in the societal concern category?
I think it probably depends on the story. I wouldn't say yes, and I wouldn't say no. I mean, that could also, we don't have a crime category. We do have hard news categories. We have hard news features categories. The burden on you is to be on why isn't this a hard news category entry?
Well, I mean, I would say here in the Bay Area, because it's a societal concern. I mean, it's something we've seen tremendously over the past year with response from police. I don't know. Looking at my piece, I wouldn't have even thought to put it in the hard news category. I just thought it fit societal concern, but the definition was somewhat open.
Well, you also have a serious feature category and other stuff. I think we have to look at it and decide, and we'll do what's best for you and what's best for the entry and what's best for the category and what's fair to everybody. Daryl, do you have any thoughts weighing in on that, this particular issue, or does it fit in as something else?
I think the entry really has to be looked at to see where it fits. And the entry can make the suggestion that the certification team is going to look at it and call you back and say, is this what it really belongs?
We're not going to do you wrong, Melanie. We're going to do you right, one way or another. If we don't think it fits in the category, the judges won't think it fits in the category either. But,
what are some examples? I mean, if you had to give examples of societal concerns, what comes to mind when you split that off from government and politics?
I don't know yet. I mean, name something that's not listed in the Emmys. Name an area that's not listed in the Emmys. You know, that would be a societal concern. It might be an issue. It could be mental health. It could be that might go into science. I don't really know. I mean, don't put me on the spot. I think we need to look and see what we have. I invite you to try and stick that thing in there if you want. And if it doesn't fit, we'll move it. And if it does fit, we'll leave it. But we can't tell you based on what we have, so don't pin me down. Show us the entry.
So in essence, it's, if you look at categories, what is this, 12 through 28, it's if you have an entry that doesn't belong in any one of those categories. Societal concerns is it's the catch-all. It's the, I have this, but it doesn't quite fit the definition of any one of those single categories, but it is something of a societal concern, so it would fit in there. Is that correct, Wayne?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, and we don't have a crime category, but we'll have to see. But you're talking in specific cases, so I don't know. I think of societal concerns as being something broader than vehicle theft and break-ins. But again, it depends on the piece. It depends how you frame it. And having not seen it, I can't tell you. So we will take care of you one way or another.
I'll send it your way, Wayne.
Well, just submit
I'll send you the link.
Submit it where you want, and then we'll look at it.
Okay.
I'm not in a position where I can, as a word chair, I can't advise you where to put something right now. I can't cross that line. I've got to treat everybody pretty much the same.
Yeah,
And
this
I hope
might be
you
a
appreciate that.
good time. This might be a good time to talk about category changes also, and that once the contest is done and basically everything is in, we will put that master list up on the website so you can see all the entries in the categories that you're in. And if you look at the competition and you feel that you are better off in another category, want to move it, as long as it's before that category is certified, you can move that to a different category for a $25 processing fee to have it moved. So that's one of the things that people look forward to, is that master list coming out and the ability to move it to a different category at that point if you want to.
Okay. So let me move on here. We took politics and government, we moved it out of societal concerns, made it its own category. The theory being that there was a heck of a lot of politics and a lot of government going on this year. We had a recall election, all kinds of stuff. I think it's strong enough to stand on its own. So that's what we're doing there. Children, youth, or teen. The Academy is putting new emphasis on children's programming this year. And we have been asked for several years consecutively to have a youth programming category. So we have done that this year. And it covers up to age, what is it, Daryl? Age 18, something like that. So if you've done something appealing to them, or there's for them, or that kind of audience, and 19 and under, throw it in there. We also made a change in the sports promotion category this year. We added it. And the reason was that sports promotion seemed to start dominating the news promotions and programming promotions. So we split them up. Now news has its own promotion category. Programming has its own promotion category. And now sports has its own promotion category, because they're all different and it's hard to judge one against another. So we think we've opened up the category there and hope to see more submissions in those categories. Graphic arts is a new category in the English contest. We're seeing a lot more graphics and stories. We haven't really defined exactly what we mean by graphic arts. It's kind of a catch-all. Could be the graphics you put in a story, could be graphics you make for a story, but it's there. And it's something that we will allow you to consider. Those are the basic changes. What else y'all want to know on those?
Wayne, you did want to emphasize in that graphic, it's not some graphics package that a network of station uses,
Right.
For supers, for opens, closes.
No.
It's
No,
supposed
they've
to
got to be done. They've got to be done for locally.
generated.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, if it was a graphics package, I believe when we discussed this, if it was a graphics package done by a national house that handles everything done by your group, there really is no reason, but it was only done specifically for your station. I think in that case, they could enter it. They could submit it. There's nothing, as long as it's only for this market and only for this region. But if it's a graphics package, it's shared by stations all across the group and all markets of the country. The answer would be no. Does that distinction make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, Wayne. If I may jump in here, as a station that does have our own graphics package, we have a lot of templated graphics. So, and a lot of things that we would have in our newscast wouldn't necessarily. But yeah, let's say that our national hub, we call them, our national graphics team, made graphics specifically for a program that we're doing at our local station that is not part of their overall look necessarily. Yes, that could technically be something, but it would have to be a very specific instance of making something specifically for a local station in order to be eligible.
Okay. Bottom line, for the market.
All right, let me add to that also, that is the person that is entering. So the graphic artist that is entering that package would be from wherever he's working for. If it's in Texas or Chicago or wherever, they can enter. And that's one of the cross promotions that we have between our categories, is that once you're a member of the Academy in any of the 19 chapters, you can enter any of the 19 chapters awards as a member and get the member rates. You just have to do a little bit more work to fill out the form and get it approved from the other chapter that you're doing it. But we have members of other chapters entering our specifically in the graphic side. There's a graphic artist in Chicago that does stuff for out here, and And we have one in Reno that enters the Northwest contest every year because he does packages for the stations up in Seattle. So yes, you can enter, but it would be the person that actually did the graphics, not the local graphic artist that happens to work at your station that didn't do the work.
Makes sense to everybody? So let me go into another subject just in general here. I talked about this last year. I talked about it in an article this year and off camera and would recommend you read it. But this has to do with just general tips for entering the Emmy Awards. And I learned a few of them over the years, things that work and things that don't work. One of the keys, one of the most important points is that as you do an entry, you need to look at it with jaded eyes. You need to look at yourself as a tough critic. And you need to look at it through the eyes of someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know anything about your work, does not know your acquired taste, does not get to give you an inside strike. So your work needs to be really, really good. It needs to be different. It needs to show potential. Ideally, it advances the medium in what you're doing. One of the best tips I can give you is that if you have an entry, keep it under 5 minutes. Because if you do that, the judges are required to watch all of it. And the longer an entry goes, the less we require, from 5 to 15 minutes. From 5 minutes and 1 second to 15 minutes, they only have to watch half. So under 5, they don't have a chance to click out. They're going to see the whole darn thing. And you don't want somebody scrubbing through an entry. So I think, summarize it, the idea is you respect the judge's time. And remember that they're going through here looking for a recipient. They're going through here looking for excellence. They're not particularly interested in being entertained. They're doing this for a purpose. So shorter is better than longer. Give them just enough to make your point and no more. And remember that even if you have something shorter or something longer, if judges see merit, they're not going to click out. If they think they've got a potential recipient on their hands, they're going to watch it because that's their task. That's what they're after. Let me give you a practical example. It's in the article. Let's say you're in the spot news category. You have the lead story, and you put on your entry the opening of the newscast, and then the anchor intro, and then your story, and it runs more than 5 minutes. You're hurting yourself. On an entry like that, get right to the story. Maybe have the anchor toss, but that's about all. If you were doing a talent composite, the last thing you want to do is open a talent composite entry with an anchor man introducing to you. Make sense? These are common sense things. And remember that this is a television contest. So your entry does need to entertain them to a degree. They have to look at what they're looking at, like what they're looking at. That means you need a very strong opening, and you need an even stronger finish. And the last thing you want them to do is hitting that button and scrubbing through in the middle. If they hit the scrub button, you're losing them. So you need to make it good. Composites allow as many as 5 submissions in a category. And that doesn't mean you need to put 5 submissions in a category. You could do it with 1. You could do it with 2. I was talking to a young man from Reno last night. He said, what about this story and this story and this story? I said, look, if it's not as good as the first one, don't put it in. You make your case, you get out. I won a lot of craft Emmys in my career in a time when we allowed 3 entries in a composite. I would put in 2. The first entry establishes that you're really good at what you do, that you're worth watching. It gets the respect of the judge and the panel. The second one solidifies it, makes them like you. They like the story. You're done. You're out. Remember, they put that score down at the end of the session. And if you can do it in under 5 minutes, even better. Anytime you go on longer than 5 minutes and the judge is bored, they're going to start scoring down. It's a tough process, but it's true. So respect brevity, respect the judge's time. Does that make sense to you? And one of the reasons I'm saying this is we want high scores. It's a lot easier for us when we do our blind scoring cutoff at the end of the year to award when the numbers deserve it. So don't oversell yourself. Sometimes it's better to leave them wanting a little bit more than a little bit less. It works that way, and it's just human nature. Less is more. Impress them, get on, get off, move on, respect their time. They're going to respect your effort. You're probably going to get a higher score. It's just human nature. People have always asked me about the précis and how do you write a good précis? And I think the answer on that one is remember this sentence: you will never win an Emmy with a précis, but you might very well lose it with the précis. Don't go on there and tell us about all that you overcame to get that story done, that you went through miles and rain and under tight deadlines and yada, yada, yada. Bottom line is, it's what's on the tape or on the video or on the clip that counts the most. Your best précis is kind of short. It's humble. You do it almost as an introduction or a tease. You make sure that all your spelling is correct, your grammar is correct, that everything is right. And remember that they're probably going to be reading that précis while they're looking at the beginning of your piece. So you don't want it to be long and you don't want it to be distracting. That's just basic psychology. One thing you might use in a précis, if you have a longer entry, let's say you're at 10 minutes and they're only required to watch that 50%. You might, in the précis, start noting to the judges saying, I know your time is valuable. Here are the highlights in our story, which runs X number of minutes. And say to them, please note what we consider to be our best moments. You'll find them from 1:36 to 2:58, from 6 minutes to 9:27, from 25 minutes to 30 minutes. In other words, you're giving the judges a guideline for what they shouldn't miss. And if they like that, they may go back and look at the rest. But you're giving them a sense of your best work and what to look for. And it's kind of like an insurance policy. And I know some of you have done that in the past, right? Yeah. There's this phrase I use in my book, but we all do it at different names. You need an entry that has what I would describe as universal appeal. In other words, the best example of this is the reporter in Memphis, Tennessee, a few years ago, a kid I've mentored for years, who's done very well. He called me up one day. He said, I'm going to win an Emmy. It's the best story I've ever done. I kicked the competition's ass. And I said, well, show me the story. And he did. And he did. He kicked the competition's ass. But I told him he wasn't going to win an Emmy with it. And he goes, I'll make a bet. And we bet $1. And he didn't win it. He didn't even get nominated. And the reason was, although he kicked butt, it required too much local information, too much need to know stuff that a viewer in another market isn't going to relate to. So bottom line here is you need to do a story that anyone, anywhere can relate to, that has emotion, that has sentiment, that anybody that would show in any market, it's going to touch people. That's what I call universal appeal. For a reporter, it's not much different than what you would do on a reel. Reporters get jobs because the stories on their reel go beyond that market. You need to do the same thing here. You're really on a long shot if you think that you're going to do a story on something that requires a whole lot of local knowledge. If you're not able to branch it out, you're not going to have a lot of luck. So you need to appeal to anybody, anywhere. I'd also warn you in advance that technical issues really matter on an entry. They're crucial because anything that goes wrong is distracting. The first mistake we always see is a countdown. Get rid of the countdown. Second mistake we almost always see is they'll submit something with split tracks. Audio, the track and the narration on one side, the background sound on the other, then it flips back and forth. That's a kiss of death. First of all, it suggests that you're entering something not as aired. Second, the two channels of audio coming at you are distracting. And you don't know if the judges have their computer set properly. So the mix may be off. So take that out of the equation. Take the mix issue out of the equation. Just combine your tracks as you would in any resume tape mix it together, one less thing to worry about, and make sure you put it on not one, but on both channels simultaneously. Make sense? I always, you know, no countdowns. Dips to black should be no more than 2 seconds. Enter your segment as aired. And make sure you watch your submission from beginning to end before you submit it. You never know what you might have missed. You never know what might be at the end of that reel or how long the shot, might go. All these things are issues that you need to consider. So make it as clean as you can. Get it on, get it off. Don't waste their time. Don't do anything to distract from the material. Okay, make sense? Still with me? The last thing and this is just a caveat, and I've written this before and I'll tell you again, and that is please abide by the spirit of this competition. And I've talked already about how we work on the honor system, and we do. And if you violate that honor system in previous years, and we see that, we're going to pay more attention to you in subsequent years. So enter what you shot, enter it as it aired, don't make any changes, make it straightforward, and treat other contestants in your category as you would want to be treated. The example that comes to mind most was a story out of the Bay Area several years ago, where there was an animal, a mountain lion, in a tree, and the mountain lion was eventually shot to death by the authorities because they couldn't get out. They deemed it a threat. The reporter on the day side did a heck of a really good job, and it was a very good spot news story. Unfortunately, the nighttime reporter came in to do the follow, and he submitted his version of the story as well. And when the Academy shuffled, and it's all random, shuffled those stories, the nighttime story ran before the daytime story. And to make it worse, the nighttime reporter took some of the same video, some of the same shots, and used some of the same audio as the guy in the daytime. So that's just not cool. So be cool. If somebody else did most of the work, let them get it. If you need to talk with other members of your staff, do so. We don't want embarrassing situations. And that's the crux of my advice to you. I'll take any more questions you got about anything.
Hey, Wayne, do you?
Oh, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to kind of highlight for folks how the entries are judged, both on the content and on the craft side. And generally speaking, people will ask me very often, hey, I did these stories, take a look at them. What do you think? Do you think they would have a chance? And I always answer them that, you have to sort of think that you need to consistently get 9s or 10s from judges in order to guarantee yourself an Emmy. So do you want to maybe walk folks through kind of the...
I can. I mean, a lot of people have asked me the same question. And what I'll do is I'll actually judge it for them. And they go, what do you mean I only got a 6? Well, only got a 6. There was a piece the other day somebody sent me, and I said, take a look at it in 2 months and get back to me. Content, news and programming stories are judged on 3 criteria: creativity, content, and execution, all in a 10-point scale. And we get a minimum of 7 judges looking at them. They're not all from the same market. They don't all sit in the same room. They don't eat pizza anymore. They sit at home and they watch and they judge independently, and they don't talk to each other. We look at their numbers and we get a blind score. We don't know what we're looking at. And we simply do a numbers cut. We have criteria. I don't know that they have to have 9s, Devin. A 9 is a pretty good number. They're hard to get. We see a lot of 5s. We see a lot of 6s. If you get into the 7s, you might, 3 7s of 21. Now you're getting in a nomination range. But remember, the judges are tough. I don't know if we've ever had a perfect score of 10, 10, 10 on anything in this academy. We don't know, and we'll never know because we're not privy to what scored where. We only know the numbers that we gain. So creativity, content, execution. Content is easy. Creativity and execution are really issues that the judge has to decide. There's a fine line between the two of them. It's like how you did it, and then why you did it, and what inspired you to do it. And I can't put a description on those. Now, if you get into the craft categories, the content issue goes away. And that's been a discussion in the past, but it's only judged on creativity and execution. And so then you're getting a best out of 20 points, and then it's rounded up, not by us, but by an accountant who turns that 20 or into that possible 20 score into a 30. And then we look at it again. But again, we don't know what we're looking at. And it's a very subjective thing. I mean, we will generally, if we have more than 7 or 8 scores, we may throw out the highs and we may throw out the lows. We look for judging patterns by someone. If we get the feeling that one judge favored somebody because they knew them or liked them or had a bias against them, we may throw that out. We want people who are going to be consistent, but ultimately it's a subjective process, and sometimes it's kind of like throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and you don't know what's going to stick and you're really surprised. I don't know if that answers the question, but the best I can do. Daryl, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, a couple of things I want Pamela to talk a little about too. She's our number one judge. She judges more categories than almost everybody else combined, and does all the different chapters. So she's our chief judge when it comes for other chapters. But the word peer judging is the key to this, and it looks at ourselves in the mirror as well as what we do with other chapters. So we send our entries out to a number of other chapters to look at. In the past, as Wayne said, it used to be you had a night at the station, you bought pizza, everybody sat in the room, and as soon as you watched enough of an entry, you raised your hand and you said, I've scored, let's. So that all went away when we went to online judging, and people doing it at work, doing it at home, hopefully on a fairly large screen and not on too small of a screen to see what you're looking at. But rely on peer judging. So you must work in the category that you're judging. You must have an expertise in that category that you're judging in order to be the judge. And that's true for when we send ours to other chapters and when the other chapters send their entries to us. The criteria, again, of content creativity and execution is all subjective to the judge, and that's why we have 7 different judges to try to get a bell curve of what their experiences are and what their thoughts are on the particular entry. It does make a difference. So if we see a judge that is highballing and lowballing and scoring 10 10 10 and 1 1 1 or 3 3 3, we're going to pull that judge out and talk to the other chapter and say, hey, you got a problem here. We're not going to allow this judge. Could you find another one? We have had times where we have a category that is low that we think is judged wrong. This is more back when we were trading 7 to 7 categories. The thing that we're doing this year, we started last year. We're going to try to do it with every category this year, and that is to get rid of chapter bias. We are asking for 2 judges from 4 chapters to look at the programming entries. So we get a cross range of judges from different markets rather than 7 judges from the one market. There is in the rules that says you cannot have more 3 judges from the same station, but that was more from the old system where we were judging, in one room, and you gather judges together. It hasn't been that much of a problem now that we're spread out amongst the other chapters. So that's my thoughts. Pamela, why don't you add into that?
Well, judging, as you said, is so subjective, and we have to trust the other chapters to do due diligence. And very often we find entries that haven't really been screened, are in the wrong categories, or have, there are duplications. They miss it, and we might make mistakes too. But I mean, that's one of the things about judging. You have to trust the panel. You have to trust their decisions, and it isn't always easy. I know last year, one of the sports categories was judged by someone who had no sports history at all. And there's really not much we can do about it. Even if her scores were thrown out, it wouldn't have changed the scores. But it's just, if there is a conflict, you put it on there. If there's a question, you put it on there, and they do have to take a look at that. And I know we do that also. Whenever any of our entries are questioned, we go back and we take those questions seriously. So it's an arduous process, especially checking all the names, and we have a system for that, which is really great. And hopefully it'll catch some of those mistakes.
We get a long list every year. And if you judge this year, and I'm sure many of you will, hopefully, you'll see at the bottom that there always is a place for lodging a protest or a complaint or saying something wrong with the category. Well, those add up, and we'll get pages of stuff before we look at numbers, and we'll have to sort through all that stuff and find out what's good or what's bad and what's real and what isn't. You know, some of the judges know exactly what they're talking about. Others just want to make comments, but they do comment to us, and we have to look at all that individually.
That isn't, hopefully we want you to judge. You are required to judge. It's right in the call for entries that if you enter the contest, you are required to judge from another chapter, and at least one or two. Many chapters and it is in our actual call that in order to receive the membership rate, you must be a judge. We have not enforced that because we're still at about 20 to 25% of entrants that are actual judges. We have some great judges, but they do a lot of judging rather than everybody doing their fair share across the board. So we're striving each year to get more judges and to have everybody that enters be a judge. And maybe next year, if that happens, we will go ahead and enforce that and say, in order to get the member rates, you must be a judge. Again, it's in the call. We can enforce it. We have not enforced it because of the numbers we've had, but we can certainly do that.
It makes sense to judge, though. The best way to learn how to enter this contest is to look at as much stuff as you can, which is probably why Pamela's done so well over the years.
Wayne, can I ask a few category-specific questions?
Okay.
I was wondering if you could define human interest and how that differs from a feature when you're looking at the human interest category. What are you hoping to see there?
It says it appeals to the human spirit. We'll leave it at that. I personally think it's a redundant category, but other people don't, and people like to enter it. We have good numbers on it, so we keep it. It seems to be a very popular category.
Couple of questions about the daily news report category. Obviously in the definition, it's very clear it has to be shot, written, edited, everything in the same day. If you've got a daily news report that checks all of those boxes, but has the tiniest bit, like 5 seconds of file video in it.
That's not a problem.
That's okay.
Look, daily news often uses file tape. As long as the story is not based on the file tape, as long as the story is new, the file tape backs something up, nobody's going to give you a bad time about that.
One more daily news report question for somebody like myself who's an I-team person but does a lot of day turn I-team pieces. If you've got a piece that you shot, edited same day, but you have the reference to the I-team in the piece, is that okay? Is it going to get knocked out of daily news because there's an I-team CG in it?
Oh, that's a good question. It comes into the concept of branded franchise.
I mean, because I don't do long form I-team, I do day of digging. So I'm, there's no good category.
One way around that is simply to avoid entering as aired. The air check, simply take the piece off your reel and put it in that way.
Sometimes the track has a mention of I-team, like the I-team app store.
Yeah, well, if it's a daily turn, I don't think it's a problem. this is a big deal we've gone over in the past. Julie Watts, who's on the line, can talk about that too. It's the difference between labeling and reality. We're not going to let labeling get in the way of reality. If it's a day turn, it's a day turn. That's my
Yeah,
view.
I would say I think that we as a committee have decided we're not going to flag that when we're reviewing them. But you also have to realize if you've got a bunch of GA reporters who are judging and they see or hear I-Team, they may give you an unnecessary bias thinking, oh, they must have had a lot of help. This isn't a real GA reporter. So, I mean, it's just something to be mindful of. You might get dinged by the judges, but we as a committee aren't going to move you.
That's a really good point. A really good point, Julie. True. We
Can
can't
you tell
account for what the judges are going to do.
Thank you. That's helpful. Can you tell us, Wayne, the writer category, what's the difference between news and content? What does that mean? Writer, news, writer,
well,
content.
news is news. I think content is programming type stuff. Programming content are really interchangeable at this point. The Academy changed the word. News goes to news.
So if you wanted to enter the writer category for your writing of your packages, you're slotting it in news.
You're going to news.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
PG, this is a really specific one, but again, I struggle with these categories and wanting to sort of fit the rules, but some of the category definitions are a little bit vague sometimes. Pieces about PG&E, again, a very something we cover often in the Bay Area. Environment science, politics, government, where would those sort of pieces land?
Depends on the story. I can't tell you. I'm not going to make a judgment on that. Depends on the content and how you ran it and what it consisted of and where you're going with it. You could also go into continuing coverage, but I don't know. That's your call. And having not seen it, I can't tell you.
And Melanie, this is Devin over at Channel 5. Generally speaking, there's a few categories that are a little bit elastic, and depending on the nature of the work, there may be one or two, maybe three categories where something logically could be entered, and I think you can legitimately choose between those. Sometimes there's a little strategy that comes into play, but like there might be something in terms of historic, cultural, and arts and entertainment where there's a bit of an overlap, and maybe legitimately you could put it in one or the other. But I mean, that's kind of an individual choice in terms of where do I think this most appropriately fits, and then maybe a little bit of strategy too. But generally speaking, I mean, you kind of know that I think that the definition of this allows you to put this story in that category.
Thank you.
I'd agree with that. You're gonna follow your instinct on it, and there's also this theory that worked really well over the years for me, which was the idea of counter programming within a category. In other words, doing something that fits the definition of the category, but on the other hand, maybe it's a little bit different from anything else anybody would see. That often works for you.
And, one question finally, can you enter more than one piece in one category where you've got the same title, or is that a big no?
Same title?
In other words, can you as a reporter compete against yourself within a category?
Sure. Happens all the time.
I just want to add a little bit about our call for entries that differs from some of the other chapters, and that is the categories 12 to 28. We allow news and content, or news and programming, to enter any of those categories. In the master list of call for entries, there is separate, all those categories are listed under news, and all those categories are listed under programming. We combine the two in order to keep the number of categories down. That's why human interest is in the programming side, but is also a news feature. Is that the same thing? Yes, it probably is. So we allow our news people to enter into the programming categories if their particular news story fits in those other categories. Other chapters delineate separately from news only to programming only, and the two don't mix. Ours are mixed. So that's one difference in our call for interest. The other thing I wanted to mention is that going back and forth between that, when other chapters are judging us, times say, well, this belongs in a different category, but that's one that we don't offer. So again, we look at all those challenges, but in most cases, our vetting of or our certification process has already gone through those and found that it is in the right category, and we're going to leave it there. But we get a lot of comments from other judges saying, gee, this doesn't belong here, it belongs somewhere else. But we don't offer the other one. So that's why it's what it is.
And you do
Daryl,
have.
or Wayne, can I add something to that?
Sure.
You know, and this kind of goes back to Melanie's question earlier, but I think it's an important one. We do see that a lot where a judge flags something saying it's in the wrong category, even though we've allowed it. And my concern has always been that that judge, and maybe others who didn't flag it, judged it lower than they might have otherwise because they think it's in the wrong category. So it's just something to be mindful of, the sort of temperature of the judge judging your work. Even if we allow it in a category, if the judge doesn't feel like it fits, you might get dinged for it.
Yeah. Don't, I think the lesson here, Julie, you know this one really well, is don't try to outthink the judges, because you never know what you're going to get. We had a serious feature category a couple of years ago, and I know Julie was in it and some other people. And Julie, you were entering stuff that was almost investigative, but it was very, very serious. And there were some other people that did the same thing. And it was judged in a market where they considered serious feature to be a feature. In other words, something emotional about a person, about a softer type subject.
Wayne Freedman type story.
Yeah, former Wayne
but it was
Freedman.
a waste of an entry because of that.
Right. So don't overthink. Look at the category, look at the definition of the category, and try to find what fits best. Don't get too fancy, because if it's good, it's good. Make sure that the right people are looking at it and that they expect what they're going to get. Don't outthink the judges. Make it easy for them. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have something to say on the titles, since Melanie had asked about titles. If you know you're going to be entering something like a breaking news story, make sure you know what else is being entered by your station so that we don't have 5 entries that say Napa fire. Make sure that your entry is labeled differently, and keep it concise, because there are too many entries to say homeless man reunited with long lost brother across the country after 10 years. And it's ridiculous. Just keep it to a few words. And for the people from Hawaii who are entering, last year we had a problem because the Hawaiian language has a different punctuation system, and they entered it fully Hawaiian, and Emmy Express doesn't read Hawaiian. So on the master list, it came out as gibberish. So try to just let them know, use the English alphabet to enter something in a foreign language.
Okay, let me make a couple of other just general observations, and hopefully these get around in terms of entering and what you fill out on your form. If you do put a composite in there this year, we do need the 2 seconds of black between every section. And we need to know the original air date of every single section so we can cross-reference it. That's one of the things that makes us crazy every year. We need to know what you're entered. If you give us 5 pieces in a composite and they're not all listed, we're going to kick it back at you. So do the work in advance. I sent something like 300 emails to people last year. And in most cases, they simply needed to read the call for entries and follow the rules. Daryl, are there any other things that we see often that are repetitive that we spend a lot of time on? I mean, aside from double dipping.
Yeah, the system has been upgraded now. So there is a composite box when there is a category that allows a composite that gives you a chart to fill in on each of the 5 air dates and the slugs for each of those. And that's one of the things we cross-check for double dipping is on the composite side. So be sure to fill in the composite box when you do that. The other thing is upper lowercase. Please use upper lowercase. Do that on your membership application also. And when you renew your membership, go into your dashboard and make sure that everything is in upper lowercase. Emmy Express takes that over to the contest side. So when someone is filling in an entry form and puts 10 names on there from and matches them up to the membership list, it's going to pull the name down as listed in the membership. So make sure you have your on-air name in the membership side, not your married name. Make sure it's upper and lowercase because that's what's going to be pulled down. If you want your middle name in there or your middle initial, put it in to the membership side also, as well as the entrance side.
Also, make sure that you know that on your reel, all we want to see is what aired. We don't want internal edits. Those are VEMUs. We don't want you adding anything. We don't want slates. There was a case last year where one entrant inadvertently put slates on every entry. And I think that was, Julie, was that from you entering an HTML? Is that what we figured out on that one? Writing.
Yeah, when I did my precies, I did it in HTML and it showed up for some reason on the first frame of every entry. It wasn't a slate, it was my precies that showed up as the first frame when, like, on the video clip that you looked at. So we went back and forth and they're like, take your slate down. I said, I didn't put a slate up. And it took a while before we figured it was some tweak. It was an issue in Emmy Express. And I think they fixed it.
I hope so. It was weird. We spent a good day on that.
I thought the NBC Sports Bay Area also included like a slate at the head, if I remember.
No, I don't think. We had a couple of instances of it. And we had to get it fixed, and hopefully that won't happen again. Obviously, don't try to pull a fast one on us. I know nobody in this room would, but we had a case last year where we saw the same piece submitted by the same person under two different names and two different categories. Don't do that. It was an inadvertent mistake, but still, it was a mistake. Makes our lives difficult. Anything else? Anybody? Where we at, Daryl?
Before we end, we need Julie to tell us all about the gala that's going to come up on June 11th.
Well, assuming Omicron goes away and we can all meet in person, we are planning our gala, and anyone who would like to be involved or have input, we would love to have your input on the committee. We are still in the beginning stages, but we have our first walkthrough planned on January 15th, where we'll be going through. And for folks who were there the last time we were at this venue, we're hoping to bring back some of the best stuff that we had back then. So wine tasting and or champagne tasting. And it's going to be a sit-down dinner once again. So we are back to buying tables, sitting down with our friends and coworkers. Hopefully your station can go in and buy some tables so you guys can all be seated together. But it really makes for a fun event because you've got a 3-course meal while you're watching the show. Right now, in terms of speeches, we are planning on doing live speeches and asking the recipients to cut together a 15 second? I believe it's 15 second, basically clip from your entry to play as you walk up onto the stage. And so we will be doing in-person speeches in hopes that everyone will be there in person to accept their trophies this year. And we'll have more details roll out after we do our walkthrough on the 15th about specifics.
And Julie, thank you so much for everything you're doing on this and getting an early start on it. And I'm always looking for people to help us with the certification. A lot of people here are governors and you'll hardly be involved, but if you're interested in the certification process and maybe getting involved with us, get in touch with me or anyone you know. If you have questions about entering, feel free to ask. I can do everything but tell you what to enter, but I can strongly hint. But I can't tell you what to do, but I can strongly hint.
Okay, with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today and everybody who's watching this after the fact. We'll be archiving this on the website for anybody who might have missed it or wants to share some information with other people who could not make it today. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. So have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, everybody.
And good luck, everybody.
And good luck.